In the heart of Manhattan's Diamond District, a woman in simple clothes walked into Brilliance & Co., one of America's most prestigious jewelry stores. The sales manager took one look at her worn sneakers and faded jeans and decided she didn't belong. What he didn't know was that she owned every diamond, every emerald, every piece of gold in that gleaming showroom. 5 minutes later, his world would crumble. This is the story of Victoria Sterling, a woman who built an empire from nothing, only to watch her own employees treat her like she was worth nothing. But sometimes, the most powerful response is the quietest one. What would you do if your own success made you invisible to those who should serve you? Victoria Sterling moved through the bustling streets of New York like a shadow among giants. At 52, she had learned the art of invisibility. Not by choice, but by necessity. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup adorned her dark skin, and her clothes spoke of practicality rather than privilege. To the world rushing past her on Fifth Avenue, she was just another middle-aged black woman trying to make her way through the city. But beneath that unassuming exterior lived a mind that had revolutionized the jewelry industry. Victoria's fingers unconsciously touched the small gold locket at her throat. The only piece of jewelry she wore, inside was a faded photograph of her grandmother, Essie Ma, who had cleaned offices in downtown Atlanta for 30 years, dreaming that one day her grandbaby would own buildings instead of cleaning them. Victoria had done more than that. She had built Brilliance & Co. from a single pawn shop in Brooklyn into a multi-million-dollar empire with flagship stores in Manhattan, Beverly Hills, and Chicago. Her eye for precious stones was legendary among dealers. She could spot a flawless diamond from across a room and negotiate deals that left seasoned businessmen shaking their heads in admiration. Yet, as she stood outside her own flagship store on this crisp October morning, she felt the familiar weight of being underestimated. She had come here unannounced, as she often did, to observe how her employees treated customers when they thought no one important was watching. It was a practice that had served her well over the years, revealing both the best and worst in people when they believed themselves unobserved. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor. As Victoria approached the entrance, she paused for a moment, watching through the glass as her employees prepared for another day of luxury retail. They moved with practiced efficiency, arranging displays and greeting early customers with the kind of polished professionalism that had made Brilliance & Co. a household name among the wealthy. Victoria had personally trained many of these people, teaching them not just about jewelry, but about respect and dignity for every customer who walked through those doors, or so she had thought. She adjusted her simple black purse on her shoulder, took a deep breath, and pushed through the gleaming glass doors. The soft chime announced her arrival, but the busy sales floor barely noticed another unremarkable customer entering their exclusive domain. 25 years earlier, Victoria Sterling had been Victoria Washington, a brilliant gemology student at the Gemological Institute of America. Working 3 jobs to pay for her education, she possessed an almost supernatural ability to identify precious stones and their origins, a gift that should have opened every door in the industry. Instead, those doors remained firmly closed. Her professors praised her work privately, but never recommended her for the prestigious internships that launched careers. Her fellow students, mostly white men from affluent families, dismissed her contributions during group projects, often taking credit for her insights. When she graduated, summa cum laude, the job offers that should have flooded in never came. The breaking point had come during her final presentation at GIA. Victoria had discovered a new method for identifying synthetic diamonds that was so accurate It could save the industry millions in fraudulent sales. As she stood before a panel of industry leaders, her hands trembling slightly as she explained her breakthrough, she watched their faces transform from polite attention to genuine amazement. Dr. Harrison Webb, one of the most respected names in gemology, had leaned forward in his chair. "Miss Washington," he had said, his voice carrying a note of something Victoria couldn't quite identify. "This is extraordinary work." The other panelists nodded in agreement, murmuring among themselves about the implications of her discovery. For a moment, Victoria had allowed herself to hope. This was it, her ticket into the exclusive world of high-end jewelry dealing. But 2 weeks later, she opened the trade journal to find her method published under Dr. Seatside Webb's name, with no mention of her contribution. When she confronted him, his response had been delivered with cold precision. "You're a bright girl, Victoria, but this industry requires a certain presentation. Perhaps you should consider teaching instead." That night, Victoria had sat in her tiny studio apartment in Queens, holding her grandmother's locket and crying tears of rage and betrayal. Essie May had died the year before, never seeing her granddaughter graduate. Victoria had promised her grandmother's memory that she would make something of herself, but the system seemed designed to ensure she remained invisible. It was then that Victoria made a decision that would change everything. If the industry wouldn't accept her as an employee, she would become their competition. Using her grandmother's life insurance money as seed capital, she opened a small shop in Brooklyn, specializing in estate jewelry and custom pieces. Her reputation for honesty and expertise grew slowly but steadily, one satisfied customer at a time. The turning point came when she authenticated a collection of vintage Cartier pieces for a wealthy widow. Discovering that 2 items were exceptionally rare, prototypes worth 10 times their insured value, the commission from that single transaction allowed her to expand, and, within 5 years, she had opened her first upscale location in Manhattan. Victoria never forgot the lesson of that presentation room. That brilliance alone wasn't enough if the world refused to see it. She learned to navigate boardrooms filled with men who looked through her as if she were invisible, using their underestimation as a weapon. While they dismissed her, she studied them, learned their weaknesses, and built an empire they couldn't ignore. But success hadn't erased the pain of those early rejections. Every achievement was shadowed by the memory of Dr. Webb's condescending smile. Every triumph tempered by the knowledge that she had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. The interior of Brilliance & Co. gleamed under carefully positioned spotlights, each display case a masterpiece of luxury marketing. Victoria moved slowly through the store, observing the morning routine she had designed, but now saw through different eyes. Customers in expensive clothing were greeted with warm smiles and immediate attention, while others were subtly ignored or directed toward less expensive items. Marcus Fitzgerald, the store manager she had hired just 6 months ago, commanded the sales floor with an air of superiority that made Victoria's stomach tighten. At 38, he was everything the old guard of the jewelry industry respected. Harvard MBA, family connections in the business, and the kind of polished confidence that opened wallets and closed deals. His hiring had been recommended by the board, who felt the flagship store needed stronger leadership presence. Victoria approached a display case containing a stunning emerald necklace, one she had personally selected at auction in Bogota the previous year. The piece was priced at $180,000, a sum that represented more than most people earned in 3 years. She bent slightly to examine the setting, genuinely curious about how her staff would present the piece to a potential buyer. "Excuse me, Ma'am. Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade wrapped in silk. That particular piece requires special viewing arrangements. Perhaps I could show you something more accessible. Victoria straightened slowly, meeting his gaze. She had encountered this tone countless times. The carefully modulated voice of someone who had decided her economic status based on her appearance. I'd like to see this necklace. Please. Marcus's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. Of course, ma'am. However, our policy requires a credit pre-approval for items over $100,000. It's simply a matter of protecting both our customers and our inventory. He gestured toward the rear of the store. Perhaps we could start with our more moderately priced collection. We have some lovely pieces starting at just $500. The other customers in the store began to notice the interaction. A well-dressed couple paused their browsing to watch, while two sales associates exchanged glances that Victoria caught in her peripheral vision. She felt the familiar heat of humiliation rising in her chest. The same sensation she had experienced in that conference room 25 years ago. I understand your policy, Victoria said quietly, but I'm quite serious about this piece. Could you make an exception? Marcus's laugh was perfectly calibrated, loud enough for others to hear, but not so loud as to seem unprofessional. Ma'am, I appreciate your interest, but this necklace costs more than most people's houses. Our insurance requires that we verify a customer's ability to purchase before handling items of this value. I'm sure you understand. From across the store, Victoria heard one of the other customers whisper to her companion, "Some people don't know their place." The words hit her like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure, feeling her grandmother's locket against her skin like a talisman. Sarah Chen, one of the junior sales associates Victoria had personally mentored, approached hesitantly. Victoria had hired Sarah straight from community college, recognizing in the young woman the same hunger for success she had once possessed, but now Sarah's eyes held uncertainty, clearly torn between her training to assist customers and the social dynamics playing out before her. Mr. Fitzgerald, Sarah said carefully, perhaps we could arrange a private viewing. The customer seems genuinely interested. Marcus turned on Sarah with barely contained irritation. Miss Chen, I believe I've made our policy clear. When you've been in this business as long as I have, you learn to read situations accurately. This is not a serious inquiry. He turned back to Victoria with false courtesy. Ma'am, I don't want to waste any more of your time. We have a lovely department store just down the street that might better suit your budget. The humiliation was complete now, performed before an audience of customers and employees who would remember this moment long after Victoria left. She could feel their stares, hear the soft murmurs of judgment and amusement. Marcus had orchestrated this scene perfectly, maintaining plausible deniability while making his message crystal clear. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her purse. For a moment, Marcus's expression shifted, perhaps expecting her to produce documentation of wealth that would embarrass him. Instead, she withdrew her phone, her fingers moving across the screen with practiced precision. I see, she said, her voice carrying a new quality that made Marcus pause. Thank you for clarifying your policy. Mr. Fitzgerald, I believe I understand the situation perfectly now. The store fell silent, except for the soft classical music playing overhead. Victoria's presence seemed to have changed somehow, though she hadn't raised her voice or made any threatening gestures. She simply stood there, a woman in ordinary clothes, holding a phone, but the atmosphere had shifted in a way that made everyone present suddenly uncomfortable. Marcus, sensing that something had changed but not understanding what, attempted to regain control of the situation. Ma'am, if you're not planning to make a purchase today, I'm going to have to ask you to. Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen, and for the first time since entering the store, she smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, cold and precise as a cut diamond. Actually, Mr. Fitzgerald, she said, answering the call. I think I'll stay just a few more minutes. I'm expecting someone in the bathroom of her own store. Victoria Sterling locked the door and finally allowed her composure to crack. She gripped the marble sink with both hands, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed older than her 52 years, worn down by decades of having to prove her worth to people who had already decided she had none. The locket at her throat felt heavy as lead. She opened it with trembling fingers, gazing at her grandmother's faded photograph. Essie Mae's eyes looked back at her with the same quiet dignity that had carried her through 30 years of cleaning other people's messes. Never complaining, never losing faith that her granddaughter would rise above the circumstances that had defined their family for generations. I'm sorry, Grandmama, Victoria whispered to the photograph. I thought I could change things, but maybe some walls are just too high to climb. The weight of accumulated slights pressed down on her shoulders. Not just today's humiliation, but every boardroom where she'd been ignored. Every negotiation where she'd had to work twice as hard for half the respect. Every time someone had looked at her and seen a problem instead of a person. She had built an empire, employed hundreds of people, donated millions to scholarships for disadvantaged students. And yet, here she was, in her own store, being treated like she didn't belong. For a moment, Victoria considered walking away. She could sell the business, retire to some quiet place where no one knew her name or her struggles. She had enough money to disappear completely, to finally stop fighting battles that seemed designed to be unwinnable. But as she traced her grandmother's face in the photograph, Essie Mae's words echoed in her memory. Baby girl, dignity ain't something they can give you or take away. It's something you carry inside, and you carry it whether they see it or not. Victoria closed the locket and straightened her shoulders. She thought of Sarah Chen, the young woman who had tried to help her, and all the other employees who looked to her leadership. She thought of the countless customers who had been dismissed and humiliated in stores just like this one. No, she wouldn't walk away. Some lessons could only be taught through demonstration. Victoria emerged from the bathroom with her phone pressed to her ear, her voice carrying a tone of authority that seemed to transform the very air around her. David, I need you here immediately. Bring the quarterly reports and the personnel files. Yes, all of them. David Kim, her chief operating officer, had been with Victoria for 8 years. His voice on the other end of the line carried immediate concern. Victoria, what's wrong? You sound... I'm at the flagship store, she said simply. How quickly can you get here? 20 minutes in traffic. Should I bring security? Victoria's eyes found Marcus across the store, watching her with growing unease. No security necessary. David, just the files. She ended the call and approached the central display case, the one containing their most exclusive pieces. Marcus intercepted her path, his earlier confidence beginning to waver as he registered the change in her demeanor. Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist that you make your purchase decision quickly. We have other customers who... Mr. Fitzgerald, Victoria said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I'd like to see your sales figures for the past quarter. The request was so unexpected that Marcus actually took a step backward. Excuse me, ma'am? I don't know who you think you are, but that information is confidential company data. Company data? Victoria repeated, savoring the words. Yes, It certainly is. Around them, the store had grown quiet again. The other customers sensed drama unfolding, while the sales staff exchanged increasingly nervous glances. Sarah Chen had positioned herself near the phone, her instincts telling her that something significant was about to happen. Marcus attempted to regain control of the situation. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't go voluntarily, I'll be forced to call security." Victoria smiled, not the cold smile from before, but something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. "By all means, Mr. Fitzgerald, call security. Ask for Tom Rodriguez. Tell him Victoria needs to speak with him." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Tom Rodriguez was the head of security for all Brilliance & Co. locations. A man who reported directly to Victoria's smile widened as she watched understanding begin to dawn in Marcus's eyes. "That's right, Mr. Fitzgerald. I think it's time we had a proper introduction." The front door chimed as David Kim entered, his arms full of folders and his expression grim. Behind him walked Tom Rodriguez, his security uniform crisp and his face carefully neutral. Both men moved through the store with the purposeful stride of people who belonged there, who knew every corner and protocol. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling," David said, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear clearly. "I brought everything you requested." The effect was immediate and devastating. Marcus's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror. As the implications became clear, the other customers stared openly now, some beginning to recognize the name Sterling from business publications and society pages. Victoria accepted the files from David with graceful composure. "Thank you, David. Mr. Rodriguez, could you please ensure we're not disturbed for the next few minutes?" Tom nodded and positioned himself near the entrance, his presence subtly discouraging any customers from leaving until the situation resolved itself. This was a lesson that needed witnesses. Victoria opened the first folder and began reading, her voice carrying clearly through the silent store. "Mr. Fitzgerald, your sales figures for the past quarter show a decline of 15% from the previous period. Customer complaints have increased by 30%, with particular concerns about staff, attitude, and accessibility." Marcus had gone pale, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching panic. "Mrs. Sterling, I didn't realize. If I had known who you were, if you had known who I was," Victoria interrupted, her voice still maddeningly calm, "you would have treated me differently. That's exactly the problem. Mr. Fitzgerald." She turned to address the entire store, customers and employees alike. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption to your morning. I am Victoria Sterling, owner of Brilliance & Co. What you've witnessed today is unfortunately not uncommon in retail establishments throughout this city." The silence was absolute now, broken only by the soft classical music that continued to play overhead. Victoria moved to the emerald necklace she had originally wanted to see, the piece that had started this entire confrontation. "This necklace," she said, her fingers tracing the display case, "was acquired by me personally at auction in Bogota last year. I outbid 3 major dealers to secure it because I believed it belonged in this store, where it could be appreciated by customers who understand true beauty." She turned back to Marcus, who seemed to be shrinking with each word. "The irony, Mr. Fitzgerald, is that you were right about one thing. I couldn't afford this necklace, because I already own it." The devastation was complete now, witnessed by everyone present. Marcus's career his reputation, his future in the industry, all crumbling in real time. As the full scope of his error became clear, Victoria closed the personnel file with deliberate precision, the sound echoing through the silent store like a judge's gavel. Marcus stood frozen, his face ashen, while the assembled customers and staff waited for her next words. "Mr. Fitzgerald," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your employment with Brilliance & Co. is terminated. Effective immediately. David will handle the details of your transition." She turned to Sarah Chen, who had been watching the entire scene with wide eyes. "Miss Chen, you'll be serving as interim manager while we conduct a proper search for Mr. Fitzgerald's replacement. I believe you understand the values this company should represent." Sarah nodded, tears of relief and gratitude visible in her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. I won't let you down." Victoria moved toward the exit, then paused beside an elderly black woman who had been observing quietly from the corner. The woman reminded her of her grandmother, the same dignity, the same quiet strength that had carried generations through impossible circumstances. "Ma'am," Victoria said gently, "is there something I can help you find today?" The woman smiled, understanding passing between them like a shared secret. "I was just admiring that emerald necklace." "Dear, it's quite beautiful." "It is," Victoria agreed. "David, please arrange a private viewing for this lady. Full VIP treatment." As Victoria walked toward the door, she heard the woman whisper to her companion, "Now that's what I call class. Outside on Fifth Avenue." Victoria touched her grandmother's locket one final time. The October sun had climbed higher, casting different shadows across the sidewalk than when she had first approached the store. People hurried past her, wrapped in their own concerns, unaware that they had just witnessed a moment that would ripple through the jewelry industry for years to come. Victoria didn't feel vindicated or triumphant. She felt tired, but also oddly peaceful. She had not sought revenge, had not humiliated Marcus beyond what his own actions had created. She had simply revealed the truth, and sometimes that was the most powerful weapon of all. A young black woman approached, clearly a college student based on her backpack and the textbooks she carried. She had been watching through the store window, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. "Excuse me," the student said hesitantly, "but are you really Victoria Sterling? The Victoria Sterling who built Brilliance & Co.?" Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile she had worn all morning. "I am. I'm studying business at Columbia," the young woman continued, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. "I wrote my senior thesis about your company, about how you changed the luxury retail industry. You're like a legend to us." "Not a legend," Victoria said gently, "just someone who refused to stay invisible." The student's eyes filled with tears. "I want to be like you someday, to build something that matters, something that changes things." Victoria reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, one that bore only her name and a phone number. She handed it to the student. "What's your name?" "Jasmine." "Jasmine Williams." "Jasmine Williams." Victoria repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "Call me next week. We have an internship program, and I think you might be exactly what we're looking for." As Jasmine walked away, clutching the business card like a treasure, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope for the future. Essie May had been right all along. Dignity wasn't something that could be given or taken away. It was something you carried inside, whether the world chose to see it or not. And sometimes, the most powerful response wasn't revenge or anger. Sometimes it was simply showing people who you really were. and letting them live with the consequences of their choices. Victoria Sterling walked down Fifth Avenue, disappearing into the crowd like the shadow she had always been. But the light she had cast would continue to shine long after she was gone, inspiring others to carry their own dignity with quiet strength, knowing that true power comes not from being seen, but from seeing clearly who you are. Some battles are won, not with power, but with dignity. If you were her, would you forgive?